Hello everyone, it's Carrie from Inky Bee Journals and Ephemera. Welcome to my channel. In the last video, which was the first video I made for this channel, this is a new channel, I showed you a tutorial on how to make a really easy and simple little notebook with staple binding. Now, if you've never created anything before, this is one of the easiest types of little books for you to practice making. It's a great introduction to bookmaking for a very new beginner. If you're interested in learning how to make this little notebook, please go and have a look at the last video. There is an introduction to the channel at the start of the video, but the tutorial for making this is after. Now, when we made this little notebook, we generated a scrap, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to use this scrap and make some pockets that look like these. Now, this is my first scrap busters idea for you, one of many to come. So these are basically just rectangles with a thumb notch, and these are different sizes, and the thumb notches are also a different size, but it really doesn't matter what size you make. I generally determine the size of my pockets based on the size of my scrap and how big of a pocket I need. This is going to be plenty big enough to make 2 pockets to fit in this little notebook. So we can put one on the inside of the front cover, and we can put one on the inside of the back cover. If you only want to make one, then that's okay. But if you want to make 2 out of this one scrap, then I can show you how to do that. If you are not interested in having notches in yours and you prefer just a straight look across the top, that is okay. If you are interested in how to make these notches, I will show you that when we come to that part. And I will show you 2 different ways in which you can create this notch. So I'm using a double-sided piece of scrap. This is a cardstock thickness paper, and if you have a double-sided piece of scrap like me, I guess the first thing you need to consider is which side would you like to be facing up? Which side would you like to be the front of your pocket? And I would like this pretty pink flower side because it matches the front cover as well, and it will contrast against the black background. It will stand out enough that we can clearly see there's going to be a pocket there. So the first thing we basically need to do is measure our scrap on the inside of our pocket, on the inside of our book cover. And how we measure that, we don't have to be specific with a ruler. All we need to do is have a long side flush with the bottom of your cover, as straight as you can manage. Now, I don't suggest when you do this that you bring the end of your paper, your scrap paper, right up to where your signature starts, or where your center fold is. And the reason I say that is because it's never a good idea to put the edge of your pocket right up to that fold. And the reason is because when you go to close your book, you are creating extra bulk right in that fold area. And that could cause you problems being able to fold your book to close it. And the other reason is you don't want to run the risk of damaging the edge of your pocket. So pull it back from the edge just a little bit, keeping the bottom lined up. And how far away from the edge you take it is roughly 1/8 of an inch, or roughly 3 millimeters. It does not have to be specific. You can just eyeball it. But we just want to pull it away from the center fold enough to give you opening and closing clearance without trouble and without damaging the side of your pocket. Now, when you're measuring, you might find it easier to turn your paper over depending on what you have on the back of your paper. If you have a single-sided paper, so it's patterned on one side and it's plain on the other side, you might find it easier to put your pencil mark on the plain side so you can see it a little bit easier. As the back of mine is the same as the inside of this cover, it's going to be far too hard for me to see a pencil line on this. So I'm actually going to mark on the pink side. And where you want to mark is just at the edge of where your book cover is. So you need to mark in line with that. And then we can move our notebook across, out the way. And then we need to look at continuing this line all the way down to the bottom of the paper. Now, if you have some kind of grid paper that you can use the lines to make sure you're getting this all straight, that's great. And if you don't, if you do have a craft mat, particularly a self-healing craft mat with a grid on it like this small blue one, or like this large pink one that I have underneath it, you will find the grid will be really handy for a lot of times in your crafting when you want to make straight lines and keep everything nice and even. But the other thing you will thank yourself for in the future, if you do invest in one, they are a little bit expensive, but they are really worth it in the long run, because if you want to protect the surface underneath where you're working, then you can do that with one of these mats. They will last a little bit longer than the plastic type ones. These ones are still rigid, but they will last a little bit longer than just the plain plastic ones. Now, what we need to do is line up the top of our paper with one of the horizontal lines. At the same time, we need to line up our little mark line here with one of the vertical lines. And we need to do that as straight as we possibly can. And then we can get a ruler and we can put the edge of the ruler where our pencil mark is. And if we have everything straightened up as much as possible, then you will find the ruler will follow the line on the grid mat, the line on your paper, and the line above your grid mat. Sorry, the line above your paper on the grid mat. Then you can just draw yourself a line and then If you are using scissors, you can just cut along that line. Now, if you don't have scissors and you have a ruler and a craft blade of sorts, you can use that option. Now, there are a couple of different craft blades that you might have seen other crafters using. One is like this, and this is a Stanley knife. I think some people know this is like a box cutter knife. And then there is this pen-like shape. And in Australia, this comes as part of a set in a little case of different sizes and different types of blades at the end. And they're known as a craft blade set or a craft knife set. You may have seen some other similar type of pen-like craft knives that other crafters use, and you may have heard it being called an X-Acto knife. If that's what you have, then that is fine to use as well. I am going to use this today, and this is something that you will see me use a lot of in my crafting on this channel, because I'm more familiar with using this than I am using the other type of craft knives, and I'm more comfortable using this than I am a pair of scissors most of the time. This is called a finger blade, and it is not for everybody. Some people might find it awkward and uncomfortable to use. It can get easier with practice, but it is not for everybody. But my suggestion, if you're new to crafting, try a few different craft knives and see what you feel most comfortable with. And try scissors, and if you feel more comfortable with scissors, then use scissors more. And just use whatever you are comfortable with, because if you're going to be doing a lot of crafting, you need to be comfortable with the tool that you're using. So I will be using my finger blade. Now that we have our ruler all lined up, we need to put a little bit of pressure on the ruler with your fingers, and then we need to put the tip of the blade right against the ruler. And what we're going to do, while we keep the tip of the blade against the edge of the ruler, we're going to run the tip of the blade all the way down the paper to the end. Now, how sharp your blade is will determine probably how many passes that you need to do to make your paper cut apart. And just remember, if you have a nice sharp blade, there is less chance that your blade is going to potentially rip and tear at your paper. I also will tell you, you need to go nice and slowly and steadily so that you don't run the risk of slipping and run the risk of cutting your fingers. And my knife is sharp enough, so I only needed to do one pass. But there is basically one pocket pretty much ready to go. The only thing you need to do now is put a thumb notch in there, and we'll do that in a moment. Now, I've decided I want to do 2 pockets, but we can use this one to make the second pocket. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the first one, and we're going to line the 2 pieces up so that sides and the end are the same. Now, if you have one piece, the longer piece, that is blank on the other side, you might find it a bit easier to turn it over onto the blank side, so that when you use the end of your other pocket as a guide and you draw a line down there, you will be able to see your line a little bit easier. But if you have a patterned paper, you may want to use a darker pen or something that is just a little bit easier for you to see. So I'm just going to use my pencil because it is not a dark pattern, it's a light pink pattern, and I can see my pencil mark. So just like we did the first time, we're going to line this pencil mark up with a vertical line while we line the top edge up with a horizontal line as evenly as we can. And then again, we can use our ruler, just like we did before, to line all those lines up. And then use our craft knife to slowly run down the paper. If you do have a craft blade that comes with a cap, please do always put the cap back on when it's not in use, simply because this way you're less likely to accidentally hurt yourself on this blade. And the other reason is it protects your blade from all these little things that it could dull your blade as it gets damaged. Now, this is the last little scrap that we have. Now, if this was a plain colour on the back, I would have kept it. But because it's not, I'm actually going to put this in my recycle bin. But I do have a tiny scrap here from another one, and this I will keep because it's just a nice size for stamping something on, like a word or a sentiment, and then it could be made into a piece of ephemera. So anything that I don't think is big enough to do something that I'm likely to do on it, I will throw out. Well, I will put it in the recycle. So we now have both our pockets ready to go. Now, if you want to make a notch in yours, there are two ways in which you can do this. For those who don't have any special craft tools just yet, I will show you the easy way to do this. And if you have a small round bottle, or you have, well, really anything that's round, it could be a bottle lid, it could be a jar lid, it could be anything round, really. It comes down to how big of a notch you want. If you can have a small round bottle like this, or you could have something as big as this and have a nice wide notch on there. But it really is up to you how big you want it. So I'm just going to use the glue bottle for now. Now, all you need to do is place it down somewhere in the middle, and if you want to be more precise about where your middle is, a little trick is to fold it in half, but don't squash it down all the way down, because we don't want to end up with a crease all the way down the middle of our pocket. But what we can do is just pinch the tip, and that will leave just a tiny little crease. And what we can then do is we can place our bottle so that the middle of our bottle is on that crease, and we can place the bottle down as far as we would like to see the thumb notch go. I usually go about halfway down. So half your bottle is off the paper and half the bottle is on the paper. The next thing we do is we basically just use our pencil and we trace a line around the bottom of the bottle. And then all we need to do is cut this line out. Now, if you are using scissors, you might find a large pair of scissors could make cutting something small like this a little bit hard to do. So if you happen to have a small pair of scissors, and these ones are actually embroidery scissors, but if you have a small pair of scissors that are good for fussy cutting things, this would be a perfect time to use it. So we're just going to cut around that half circle line. Just like that. And there's your thumb notch. Now, a lot of people will throw these out. Some people will keep these. Why would you want to keep a small little scrap like this? Well, if you happen to have a piece of ephemera, say a tag, you might like to put it on the top of your tag as a little pull, or the side of a tag as a little pull. And that can just sometimes make it a little bit easier to get those things in and out of pockets or side tucks and things like that. So that's a personal preference thing. You can either keep them or you can put them in your recycle. So we've made one pocket. Now we can make the second pocket. Now this is where we can use a fancy tool, if you want to call it that. Now this is a 1-inch circle punch. I have two sizes, a 1-inch circle punch and a 2-inch circle punch. Which one of these you decide to use is really up to you. It comes down to how wide do you want your thumb notch to be. Now, I've done a somewhat small thumb notch in this one. It's bigger than I've done in this, but it's a nice size for that. So I'm going to show you how to use one of these. Now, if you haven't seen these before, it is a paper punch. It's just one design of a paper punch that you might see in a craft store, because there's a few different types that you'll see. But if you see ones like this space around the front here is where you put your paper in. And if we have a look on the bottom and we slide this little piece across, this space here is where your paper will go to be cut. And when you press down on this lever here, it will bring the bottom of this up and cut your paper. Now, if you have this slid across, it will usually catch that bit of paper so it doesn't fly all over the place. But when you're doing something like this, the trick is to have it open so you can see how far in, excuse me, so you can see how far in your paper is going. Now, once again, we can find the middle by pinching the top, and then we can use that as a rough guide. Now, I'm going to place this in roughly halfway and squeeze, and there is the piece that we've cut out. Again, you can keep this or you can put it in your recycle. And there we have our second thumb notch. Now these are bigger and deeper thumb notches than this one. This one's just a very small one. These are not 100% the same. They are close, but they are not 100% the same because they are from different shapes. Well, from the same shape, but this one creates a slightly bigger circle than this does. But it's not going to be a problem because we are going to put one pocket in the front and we will put the other pocket in the back. So because they're not side by side, you're not going to notice just what they look like or where the differences are. So the glue that we're going to use, glue that I am going to use, is this glue here. This is a Crafter's Choice craft glue. It's basically an all-purpose glue. I get this from Spotlight in Australia. You could probably get it in Lincraft if you're in Australia. As for stores overseas, I guess have a look at what you can get in your local craft stores. Now this goes on clear and it dries clear, and it does fabric, paper, leather, plastics, glass. It also does cardboard, wood, lace, trims, and most plastics and glass and leather. So it's pretty much a good all-rounder. Now, I tend to find that glues that are suitable for fabrics and leathers don't have a lot of water in them. And this is something you might want to consider when you're buying a glue, because glues that have a lot of water in them can have a tendency to make thinner papers get a little bit of a wrinkle in them. And although some crafters don't mind the wrinkle and embrace it, other crafters find it not so nice and aren't comfortable with it being there. So they will prefer to use a glue that doesn't have as much water in it. Having said that, if you are using a glue that is based with water in it, if you are using it on something that's a bit thicker, something like this thicker cardstock, then you could use it on that without it being more likely to cause a wrinkle. So I am just going to use this craft glue out of my little bottle. So I'm going to take my first pocket, turn it to the back side, and we're going to run a bead of glue down the two sides and the bottom. Go close to the edge, but don't go right on top of the edge, because the glue will spread a little bit when you put it down, but put it close to the edge and try to keep as straight as you can, because you don't want too much glue seeping in towards the center of your pocket, simply because the more the glue spreads out, the less the pocket has in open space for you to place the items you want to put in your pocket. This is a little bit of a tacky glue, so it has some strings to it. Whenever you are using glue, try to put the lid on, or in this case it's a little pin, into the little needle point here. Try to cover it up as often as you can, because the last thing you want is for your glue to start drying out on you and clogging up your open nozzle. Then we bring our book back in and we place our pocket on the bottom, on the inside of our cover, and we just line this edge up with the outer edge of your cover and the bottom along the bottom, as straight as we can manage. And remembering we need to leave that little bit of a gap down the side so that we don't cause any damage to the side of our pocket when closing, and we don't cause any bulk and trouble closing the book. While that one's drying, we can flip to the other end and we can place the second pocket in. Just like we did before, we place our pocket down, lining up the bottom and the side of our cover. As evenly as we can, and then pressing down on those areas. Nice and firmly, so that we're helping that glue to really bond between the two papers. We can flip back to the other side, and this will take about 15 minutes to dry properly, but it will be dry enough for us to continue. And what I like to do whenever I put a pocket in is I like to get my little small ruler. You can use a butter knife or something like that, or if you have your bigger ruler, you can use that as well. and just slide it in under your pocket and gently down the edge and to the bottom here as far as you can go, and just very gently run it all the way to the end, or to the other side I should say, and just do that gently a couple of times. And the reason we do this is it just helps to open the pocket a little bit, and it just helps to make sure that you haven't accidentally got any strings of glue where you don't want them, and you're not sticking down your pocket where you don't want your pocket to be sticking. And then we can do the same on the other side. Has altered. So there is our two pockets. Now, if you are one of these people who has seen other crafters doing inking and you're wondering, why are they inking? Do I need to ink? Is it really important? Well, the answer is no, it's not really important. It is a personal choice thing. Some crafters will do it because whenever you are cutting or tearing paper, some papers have a white edge where that cut or tear has been, and some crafters like the look of that and others don't like the look of that, and so they will use some ink in that area to hide that white edge. Some crafters will ink because they like the grungy sort of look, or they're trying to create the sort of old and worn sort of aged look. So that's a couple of the reasons they will use inking. Another reason they will use inking sometimes is because if you are putting something like a pocket down on a background where your pocket doesn't contrast very well, it may be a little bit hard to see where the pocket is. And so by having some inking along the top of your pocket, it just helps the user to point out where the top of the pocket is. So now that we have our pockets available to use in our notebooks, we can put ephemera or whatever else you might have that you want to put in your pockets in there like that. So that is the tutorial for today. If you liked this tutorial, please give me a thumbs up. If you think it might be a channel that you'd like to follow for some more beginner-friendly tutorials, then consider subscribing and clicking on that notification bell so that when I upload new content, hopefully YouTube sends you the notification so that you don't miss them. I will be back hopefully in a few days with another tutorial, or at least another video. It may not necessarily be a tutorial, but it will be a video. Till then, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.